Chapter 1. A Quiet Beginning. In the early hours of the morning, the detective, Felix Stroud, sat in the dimly lit corner of his study. His fingers drummed restlessly on the edge of his desk, a steaming cup of black coffee, his only comfort, sat untouched beside a pile of letters, ones he'd been avoiding. At the age of 42, Stroud had earned a reputation as one of the sharpest minds in the city's investigative community. But for the last few months, the cases had become repetitive, mundane, no challenge, no excitement. His assistant, Clara Whitfield, walked into the room with a letter in her hand. "Another one?" Stroud asked with a hint of resignation. Clara, ever composed, didn't answer. She simply placed the letter on his desk. The wax seal on the envelope was an unusual one, a black lotus. Sir Reginald Montgomery requests your presence at his estate in Blackwood. Clara read aloud. "He claims it's urgent." Stroud leaned forward, a spark of curiosity flickering in his eyes. A new case at last. "Prepare the car. Clara, we're going to Blackwood." Chapter 2. The Estate. Upon arrival at the Grand Montgomery estate, nestled deep within the foggy moors, Stroud and Clara were met with an air of somber mystery. The estate, with its looming towers and ivy-covered walls, seemed as though it had been untouched by time. Sir Reginald, an old friend from Stroud's earlier days as an investigator, greeted them at the door, his face pale and worn. "Felix," Sir Reginald greeted, his voice strained, "I need your help. I've made a terrible mistake, and now they are coming for me." Stroud, ever the professional, maintained his composure. "Tell me what's happened." Sir Reginald led them into the study, where an ancient, dusty tome lay open on the desk. The pages were filled with cryptic symbols, and a faint glow seemed to emanate from them. "It began when I discovered this book," Sir Reginald explained. "I thought it was just an old family relic, but now strange occurrences are happening around the estate. Disappearances, whispers in the halls, objects moving on their own. I believe the book has unleashed something dark." Chapter 3. The Black Lotus. As Stroud examined the book more closely, his mind raced with questions. He could feel the presence of something sinister, an energy that seemed to infect the very air around him. "Clara, do you know anything about this symbol?" Stroud asked, pointing to the black lotus etched into the cover. Clara's expression darkened. "It's an ancient symbol of a cult that operated in the early 1800s. They were believed to have practiced dark rites to gain immortality, but they vanished without a trace." Stroud's mind sharpened. This was no ordinary case. "Sir Reginald, who else has had access to this book?" Sir Reginald hesitated. "Only my closest family members. But there are others, too. A group known as the Midnight Circle. I fear they've been using the book for their own twisted purposes." Chapter 4. Secrets in the Shadows. That night, Stroud and Clara explored the mansion. The air was thick with the stench of something ancient and forgotten. As they descended into the basement, Stroud felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. There, in the deepest part of the estate, they discovered a hidden chamber. The walls were adorned with strange, arcane symbols, and in the center of the room was a stone pedestal, upon which lay a blood-stained cloth. "I knew it," Stroud murmured. "This is what they've been after the key to unlock the power of the Black Lotus." But before they could investigate further, they heard footsteps. A figure emerged from the shadows, an ominous man dressed in dark robes, his face concealed. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure said, his voice low and menacing. "Now, you'll all pay the price." Chapter 5. The Price of Knowledge. A brutal chase ensued through the corridors of the mansion. Stroud, ever the strategist, led Clara toward the hidden exit, but as they reached the front door, they were ambushed by more members of the Midnight Circle. "You've made a mistake, Stroud." The leader of the group sneered. "The Black Lotus is not a power to be controlled. It's a force of nature." Clara, ever resourceful, grabbed a nearby candle and hurled it at the leader, setting his robes aflame. The group scattered, allowing Stroud and Clara a brief window to escape. Chapter 6. The Final Confrontation. By the time Stroud returned to confront Sir Reginald, the mansion was in chaos. The Midnight Circle had taken control, and the ancient forces bound within the Black Lotus were beginning to manifest. "It's too late," Sir Reginald said with resignation. "I should never have meddled with forces I didn't understand. The price of immortality is far too high." Stroud looked at the book one last time. "I'll finish what you started. Reginald, it ends tonight." In a final act of defiance, Stroud plunged the book into the flames, watching as the ancient texts burned to ash. The dark presence lifted, but Stroud knew the battle wasn't over. There would always be others like the Midnight Circle people willing to risk everything for power. Epilogue. Shadows of the Past. Back in his study, Stroud reflected on the events that had transpired. The Black Lotus was destroyed, but the darkness remained. It was always out there, waiting for someone else to awaken it. Stroud knew one thing for certain: his work was far from done. As the night fell and the shadows grew longer, Stroud sipped his coffee, ready for whatever the future would bring. Chapter 7. The Whispering Shadows. Section 1. The Unseen Hand. The days following the destruction of the Black Lotus book were filled with an eerie silence. Sir Reginald had gone into hiding, unable to affect the consequences of his actions. The Midnight Circle had been scattered, but Stroud knew that the true threat was far from over. In the weeks that followed, Stroud's thoughts were consumed by the idea that there were still forces lurking in the shadows. As he stared at the embers of his fireplace one night, Clara entered his study, her face ashen. "Felix," she began, her voice tense, "I've received a message. It's from someone who claims to know about the Midnight Circle's real purpose. They say the book was only a small piece of a much larger puzzle." Stroud stood, his mind racing. "Who's sending these messages? And why now?" Clara handed him a sealed envelope, its wax bearing the unmistakable emblem of the Black Lotus. "I don't know. But they say the Midnight Circle is just the tip of the iceberg. There's something much darker beneath." Voss tore open the envelope, and inside was a single sentence, written in blood-red ink. "The darkness will never die. It only waits for the right moment." Nathan. Section 2. The Return of the Midnight Circle. A week later, Stroud and Clara ventured to the outskirts of the city. Following a lead that suggested the Midnight Circle had reformed and was operating from the shadows once again, The message had been clear. The group was still alive, and they were not done with the Black Lotus or with Stroud. The two arrived at an abandoned cathedral on the edge of town. The towering, Gothic structure had been forgotten by time. The windows shattered, and the doors locked with rusted chains. Mons. Yet, Stroud couldn't shake the feeling that this place was still alive, pulsing with the energy of the unseen forces he had fought. They entered through a cracked side door, their footsteps echoing through the desolate halls. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of incense and decay. The walls were adorned with ancient symbols, but this time, there were new markings, the same Black Lotus symbol, but intertwined with images of serpents, moons, and other unearthly creatures. Clara turned to Stroud. "Do you feel it? It's like the place is breathing." Before Stroud could answer, a figure emerged from the shadows. The figure was tall and cloaked in a black robe, their face hidden by a mask in the shape of a lotus blossom. "You should not have come here," the masked figure said, their voice low and distorted. "You have destroyed the book, but that is just one chapter in a much larger story." Stroud's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" The figure stepped forward, revealing the glint of gold rings on their fingers and the faint glow of arcane energy emanating from beneath their robes. "I am the one who will finish what you started," the figure said ominously. "The Midnight Circle is not done, not yet. We have many allies, and soon we will bring about the rebirth of the Black Lotus." Section 3. The Unraveling. Voss's hand instinctively went to the weapon hidden beneath his coat. Clara, sensing the danger, stepped closer to Stroud. "What do you want from us?" Stroud demanded. The figure tilted their head, as if savoring the moment. "What we want is simple. The Black Lotus holds the key to immortality, to control over life and death itself. The Midnight Circle will use it to ensure that the future is shaped by those who understand the true power. You destroyed the book, but you are too late. The ritual has already begun." Stroud's mind raced. The ritual, it wasn't just about resurrecting the old order. It was about something far more dangerous, transcending mortality itself. Creating a race of superhumans, free from death's grasp, capable of bending the world to their will. Clara's voice broke through his thoughts. "We can't let them complete this. Felix, if they succeed..." Stroud interrupted. "We stop them here, Clara, no matter the cost." Section 4. The Confrontation. The figure laughed, the sound echoing eerily through the cathedral. "You still don't understand. Stroud, you think you can stop us. You're out of your depth. We have already won. The ritual is already in motion. The Black Lotus is only the beginning of the power that will rise." And Stroud's eyes narrowed. He wasn't going to let this happen again. "You won't get away with this." With a swift movement, the masked figure raised their hand, and a flash of dark energy surged toward Stroud. He barely managed to dodge, feeling the rush of air as the blast narrowly missed him. Clara, instinctively, returned fire with a small dart of light, forcing the figure to step back. "We need to break the ritual," Stroud said, his voice steady. "If we destroy the source of the power, we destroy them." Lucien had warned him before the Midnight Circle wasn't a typical group of criminals. They were practitioners of something far darker, tapping into forces beyond human comprehension. If Stroud didn't act now, the ritual could reach completion, and the consequences would be irreversible. Together, Stroud and Clara raced toward the altar at the center of the cathedral. The air grew colder with each step, and the stone beneath their feet seemed to tremble with the buildup of dark energy. The masked figure followed them, his voice dripping with venom. You think you can stop the inevitable? This power is ancient. You cannot hope to destroy it. But Stroud had no choice. He knew the only way to stop the Midnight Circle was to destroy the heart of their operation, and the ritual at the altar was the source of that power. Section 5. The ritual's end, Stroud and Clara reached the altar just as the masked figure lunged forward. The air crackled with energy, and Stroud's fingers wrapped around a small stone amulet he had kept hidden in his coat, a relic he had recovered years ago. The amulet was said to counteract dark rituals, to sever the connection between the material world and the unseen forces. Clara, sensing what he was about to do, shouted, "Felix!" No, but Stroud didn't hesitate. He thrust the amulet into the center of the altar, the dark energy around them spiraling as if it were alive. The ritual faltered, the energy shifting violently. The masked figure screamed as the dark power recoiled, breaking apart like glass shattering on the ground. The figure collapsed, and the cathedral erupted in a burst of light and sound. The walls cracked, and the ancient symbols began to fade into nothingness. The Midnight Circle's ritual was undone, but at a terrible cost. The power had been disrupted, and the figure that had sought to control it was gone. Chapter 8. The Dawn of a New Era. Section 1. The Fall of Shadows. As the dust settled, Stroud stood over the remains of the altar. Clara, breathing heavily beside him, looked at the destruction around them. The Midnight Circle was no more. Their network had been shattered, their ritual interrupted. The darkness that had threatened the world was vanquished, at least for now. But Stroud knew that this wasn't the end. The power that the Midnight Circle had sought was real, and there would always be others who sought to harness it. This fight had been won, but the shadows were never truly gone. Clara spoke quietly, breaking the silence. Is it over, Felix? Stroud looked at the horizon, the first rays of dawn breaking through the clouds. No, the battle for control is never over. There will always be others. He paused, a glint of determination in his eyes. But we'll be ready. Section 2. The Final Whisper. Later that evening, Stroud sat alone in his study once more, his thoughts consumed by the events that had unfolded. The world would never be the same. He had destroyed the Midnight Circle, but their legacy, the thirst for power, the desire to control would never fade. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Clara entered, holding an envelope. This came for you, she said, her voice laced with uncertainty. Stroud opened it slowly. The message was brief. The game has only just begun. We are always watching. Voss looked up, a somber expression on his face. The shadows never truly left. The game was far from over. Epilogue. The long road ahead. Voss stood by the window, looking out into the night. The city below seemed peaceful, unaware of the battles fought in the darkness. He knew that no matter what happened, he would always be drawn back into this world, the world of shadows. power in the constant fight to protect humanity. The Black Lotus was gone, but its legacy lived on. And Voss would always be ready to fight for the light. Chapter 9. The Unseen Enemy. Section 1. The Ghost in the System. The days following the destruction of the Midnight Circle had not brought the peace Voss had hoped for. The world may have breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the darkness beneath the surface remained. There was an unsettling feeling in the air, one that Voss couldn't shake. He had destroyed the Midnight Circle's physical form, but he had come to understand something far more insidious. The real power of the Circle was never in their rituals or books. It was in the people they had controlled, the systems they had infiltrated, and the influence they had over the most powerful minds in the world. Voss sat in his study late one evening, reviewing his notes from the Midnight Circle's rise and fall. But despite all his research, there was still one thing bothering him: the anonymous message he had received earlier that night. A warning that suggested the battle was far from over. The game has only just begun. We are always watching. Voss clenched his fist around the paper. He was no longer just dealing with a group of fanatics. He was up against something far more dangerous, a network of influence so deep that even the authorities were blind to it. They had watched him, tracked his every move, and now, after the fall of the Midnight Circle, it was clear that their influence hadn't disappeared. It had simply adapted. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Clara stood there, her face grave. "There's something you need to see," she said, holding up a device. Section 2. The Hidden Network. Voss took the device from her and activated it. The screen flickered to life, showing a series of encrypted communications messages, surveillance footage, and documents, all linked to a shadowy entity that remained just out of reach. These were not just random people with a thirst for power. These were the puppet masters who had watched the Midnight Circle's collapse and had now begun to move in the shadows, waiting to take their place. "This doesn't make sense," Clara said, pointing to the files. "These messages are all encrypted through different agencies, different servers. But there's something familiar about the pattern." Voss scrolled through the documents, recognizing some of the names. Powerful political figures, CEOs, members of law enforcement, and even military leaders. They had all been compromised by the same unknown force. "It's like a chess game," Voss murmured, his brow furrowing. The Midnight Circle was only one piece. Someone has been pulling the strings behind the scenes, ensuring the fall of one group before another rises. Clara looked at him, her eyes sharp. "You think the Midnight Circle was just a front?" Voss nodded slowly. "I think they were a distraction. The real power is hidden deeper. And now that we've disrupted their plan, they're preparing for their next move. This network is more than just a group of extremists. It's global, and it's not going to stop until they achieve their ultimate goal." Section 3. The Legacy of Power. After hours of examining the encrypted files, Voss and Clara realized that the true mastermind behind the Midnight Circle was not just someone trying to bring about chaos. Their goal was much more methodical. They wanted to create a new order. The same desire for control that had once driven the Black Lotus had been passed on to another faction, a secret society that believed humanity could only be saved through absolute domination. They're planning something massive, Clara said, her voice low. A global shift. If we don't stop them, they'll reshape the world in their image. Voss leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had thought that the destruction of the Black Lotus had been the final battle, that by eliminating the circle, he had won. But this was a different kind of war, one that could not be fought with brute force alone. We need to find out who's behind this, Voss said. But this time, we need to be careful. This is not a war we can fight head on. We need to expose them, tear down their network piece by piece. Section 4. A World in the Shadows. The hunt for the puppet masters began, but it was a game of cat and mouse. Every lead they followed led to dead ends, and every time they uncovered a new thread, it was quickly buried. The enemy they were facing was smart, adaptive, and elusive. They had learned from the failures of the Midnight Circle and were moving faster than Voss had anticipated. One night, as Stroud and Clara investigated a lead, they stumbled upon an underground facility that seemed to hold the answers they were looking for. It was in a secluded area in Northern Europe, surrounded by layers of security. No one had ever come close to it. No one. Except for the shadowy figure who had left them the cryptic message. "This is it," Voss said. As they approached the facility, "This is where they've been hiding all this time." They infiltrated the facility using a combination of stealth and high-tech gadgets. The building was heavily guarded, and the deeper they went, the more they realized just how deep the conspiracy ran. The walls were lined with advanced equipment, and there were rows of files, hundreds of them, all with names of influential individuals from around the world. But it wasn't until they found a hidden room at the facility's core that the truth became clear. In that room, they found the key to everything, a holographic projection showing the inner workings of a new world order. There were images of key locations, operatives, and plans for destabilizing entire governments, manipulating economies, and creating a new global power structure. Voss's heart raced. They've been planning this for years. Section 5. The Ultimate Move. As they continued to examine the hologram, a voice echoed in the darkness behind them. "You're too late." Voss spun around to see a figure stepping from the shadows. It was a woman, tall and composed, her eyes gleaming with a chilling intensity. "It's you," Voss said, his voice filled with recognition. The woman smiled faintly. "You thought you could stop us, but we've been moving in the shadows for decades. The Midnight Circle was only one part of our plan. You destroyed it, but you've helped us evolve. Now, we are ready to ascend." Clara moved closer to Voss, her hand on her weapon. "Who are you?" The woman tilted her head. "I am Seraphina, the true leader of what you've been chasing. The Midnight Circle was simply a means to an end. What you see here is the beginning of the new world." Voss's pulse quickened. "You've been manipulating everything, pulling the strings from the shadows, using the circle as your distraction." Seraphina nodded. "You were always one step behind. The moment you destroyed the Black Lotus, you set the stage for us to rise. Now, nothing can stop us." With a wave of her hand, the room flickered, and the hologram faded into a new set of coordinates, a location that was unmistakable, the heart of the new order. Istamo. Section 6. The Final Battle. Voss and Clara knew they were running out of time. The new order had begun, and Serafina was at its center. But they had one advantage. They knew where the final phase of the plan would take place. They had the coordinates, the intel, and the courage to confront the hidden enemy at the heart of it all. The final showdown would be their last chance to prevent the world from falling into Serafina's hands. As they made their way to the heart of the operation, Voss's mind raced. He had always known that there was more to this than just power. The stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. But this time, there would be no distractions, no more shadows. This time, it would be all or nothing. Epilogue: the aftermath. The battle for the world's future had come to an end. Serafina was no more, and her plans were shattered. But the darkness she had set into motion was far from over. The fight for power was endless, and the world would never be the same. Voss stood alone at the aftermath, staring out at the world that was now free for now. But he knew that the shadows were always waiting, always watching. And when the time came, he would be ready. Chapter 10. The Shadows Return. Section 1. A faint glimmer of hope. Voss had expected the final battle with Serafina and her shadowy forces to feel like a victory. But it was hollow. Yes, Serafina was gone. Yes, the network that had aimed to rewrite the world's fate had been shattered. But in the silence that followed, the only thing Voss felt was the lingering weight of what they had uncovered. They had stopped Serafina's rise to power, but the larger, darker truth that had been buried beneath the surface for centuries had only just begun to surface. The forces that sought control, those who believed the world should bend to their will, had existed long before the Midnight Circle, long before the Black Lotus. Sitting alone in his study, Voss couldn't escape the haunting realization the battle for the soul of the world was far from over. Clara entered quietly, her face tense with the same unease that gnawed at him. "Felix," she began, her voice hesitant, "there's something I need to show you." Voss looked up from the map he had been staring at. It had been days since the battle at the heart of the new order, and the weight of it all still clung to him. "What is it?" Clara handed him a file, much like the ones they had used during their investigation of the Midnight Circle. This one, however, felt different. The contents seemed far more disturbing. "I received this from one of the underground informants," Clara continued. "It's about something called the Vanguard. It's an organization that has been lurking in the background for centuries, and they are far more dangerous than anything we've faced before." Voss's eyes narrowed. The Vanguard. He had never heard of them, but the name itself carried a weight that felt ominous. As he flipped through the file, images of secret meetings, encrypted communications, and ancient symbols filled the pages. It was clear that the Vanguard wasn't just a group of rogue individuals. They were an organized, highly secretive society with one goal: to usher in a new era, one where they controlled everything. "What do they want?" Voss asked, his voice heavy with the burden of the knowledge they had just uncovered. "And they believe in one thing above all else," Clara said. "Total control. They've infiltrated governments, the tech industry, and military sectors worldwide. The plan we stopped with Serafina was merely a diversion. The Vanguard is much more powerful than any single faction." Section 2. unraveling the vanguard in the days that followed. Voss and Clara scoured every lead in the file. The more they uncovered about the vanguard, the more terrifying the truth became. The organization was not new. It was ancient, a secret society that had quietly shaped the course of history, but it was never about revolution or power for the sake of chaos. They believed that the world could only be saved by those who had the knowledge and the means to control it, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that they were the ones who held the reins. Voss learned that the vanguard operated through a series of interconnected cells, each more secretive than the last. They controlled industries, stock markets, and even the flow of information across the globe. But what made them truly dangerous was their ability to remain completely hidden, using influence and technology to manipulate events from the shadows. "This isn't just about the world's most powerful people," Clara said one evening, frustration creeping into her voice. "It's about an entire system that's been designed to keep them in control. The vanguard is using technology, surveillance, and bioengineering to shape the future, and we're only beginning to see what they're capable of." Voss's mind raced. He had once thought the fight was over, but now it felt like they had only scratched the surface of a much larger conspiracy. The vanguard's long-term plans were still unfolding, and if they weren't stopped, the world would fall into an era of total control, a world where freedom was nothing more than a distant memory. Section 3. The Vanguard's Plan. A breakthrough came when Clara decrypted a series of messages they had intercepted. These messages revealed the Vanguard's ultimate goal, the Ascension Project. The Ascension Project was not just about control. It was about evolution. The Vanguard had been working on a secret technology that could alter human biology, making it possible to create a race of people with enhanced intelligence, physical strength, and the ability to control vast networks of information and resources. They called it the Ascended, and their vision was a world where only the Ascended ruled, and the rest of humanity was subjugated. The more Voss read, the more he understood the stakes. The Vanguard was preparing for a final phase, a global event that would reshape humanity itself. They had been preparing the world for this moment, and now, with the technology they had perfected, they were ready to implement it. "They've already started," Voss muttered. "The Ascension Project is in its final phase." Clara looked up at him, her face pale. "What do we do?" Voss's eyes were hard. "We stop them, whatever it takes." Section 4. Into the heart of darkness. Voss and Clara knew that if they wanted to stop the Vanguard, they had to strike at the heart of the Ascension Project. Their only lead was an abandoned facility in the mountains of northern Russia, where the Vanguard had been conducting their most advanced experiments. The facility was isolated and heavily guarded, but Voss had learned never to underestimate what they could do when they worked together. The journey to the facility was fraught with danger, snowstorms, treacherous terrain, and hostile forces stood between them and their goal. But Voss was relentless. He couldn't afford to fail, not when so much was at stake. When they finally arrived, the facility was exactly as they had expected: quiet, foreboding, and seemingly abandoned. But Voss knew better. The Vanguard was never far behind, and they were always watching. As they entered the complex, they were met with a terrifying sight. Rows upon rows of human test subjects were connected to strange machines. Their bodies were being altered, their minds twisted and rewritten by the Vanguard's technology. These were the ascended humans turned into something else entirely. "What have they done?" Clara whispered, horrified. Voss's heart hardened. "They're creating a new world, Clara, one where they're in control." They moved deeper into the facility, only to find the source of the power, a massive chamber filled with a glowing, pulsating core. It was here that the Vanguard conducted their final phase of the Ascension project. This was the heart of their operation. And if they destroyed it, they would cripple the entire network. Section 5. The final confrontation. As they neared the core, the doors slammed shut behind them. The Vanguard's operatives flooded into the room, and at the front of the group stood a figure, a man whose face Voss recognized. It was a man who had once been a friend, a former ally who had betrayed him long ago, Victor Graves. "You really thought you could stop us?" Voss Graves sneered, his eyes cold with malice. "You're too late. The Ascension is already in motion. The world will be ours, and you will be nothing more than a footnote in history." Voss stepped forward, his voice firm. "Not if I can help it." The final battle was brutal. Voss and Clara fought with everything they had, using every resource at their disposal to tear down the Vanguard's operation. But as the core began to crumble, Voss realized that destroying it would not be enough. They had to ensure that the Ascension project was completely eradicated. With one final, desperate act, Voss destroyed the core, sending a surge of energy through the facility. The room shook violently, and the machinery malfunctioned, causing a massive explosion. Epilogue. The dawn of a new world. As the dust settled, Voss and Clara stood amidst the wreckage. The Vanguard's plans had been stopped, and the Ascension project was no more. But as the sun began to rise over the horizon, Voss knew that their victory was bittersweet. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. There would always be those who sought power, those who believed they could control the world, but Voss would remain vigilant. He had seen the darkness that lurked in the shadows, and he knew that as long as it existed, there would always be someone ready to fight. For now, though, they had bought the world time, and Voss would be ready when the next shadow appeared. Chapter 11. The Aftermath of Shadows. Section 1. The Bitter Victory. The blast from the destruction of the Vanguard's facility had echoed far beyond the walls of the compound. But even as the echoes faded, Voss couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't truly over. The Ascension project was dismantled, the Vanguard's network severely crippled, but there was still an unsettling emptiness that lingered in the air. Voss and Clara stood among the wreckage. The facility, now a twisted maze of charred steel and broken concrete. The blood of the Ascended the Twisted, bioengineered humans was spilled across the ground. The experiment that had promised a new era of humanity was now in ruins. Yet, despite the victory, there was no celebration, no relief. The world had changed irrevocably, and that was a heavy truth to bear. Voss couldn't help but wonder, had they truly won? Or had they only delayed the inevitable? They made their way back to their makeshift base of operations in the ruins of a small town nearby. The landscape was stark, reflecting the harshness of their task. Clara had been quiet, lost in her thoughts, and Voss couldn't blame her. The knowledge of what they had witnessed haunted him as well. "You know, I thought that destroying the Vanguard's core would be the end of it," Clara said quietly as they walked through the cold, empty streets. But it feels like we've just opened the door to something even worse. Voss glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Maybe we did. Or maybe we just stopped them from taking the next step. But don't mistake it, Clara, the power they were after. It doesn't disappear just because we ended their project. It's still out there. Clara nodded, her face weary. The world's not done with us yet, is it? No, Voss replied, his voice hard. And we're not done with it. Section 2. The Unseen Network. Days passed, and Voss and Clara continued their investigation into the Vanguard's operations. Despite the physical destruction of their headquarters and their experiments, the remnants of the network were still functioning, albeit in a more covert manner. As they dug through the remnants of their intelligence, they realized the true scope of the Vanguard's reach. They weren't just fighting an organization anymore. They were fighting a system that had embedded itself so deeply within society that it was almost impossible to track. The Vanguard had established shadow cells in nearly every corner of the globe. Their influence wasn't just limited to military or political sectors. It reached into finance, media, technology, and even medicine. They were everywhere, operating under the radar, out of sight, manipulating the world's most influential institutions. Even though the core of their project had been destroyed, their presence lingered like a ghost in the machine. But there was something else, something even more disturbing. In the files they had recovered, there were references to a mysterious entity, an anonymous group within the Vanguard called the Eclipse. Unlike the rest of the Vanguard, the Eclipse was not concerned with controlling the present. They were interested in the future, and according to the files, their true goal was far more dangerous than anything Voss had seen before. This is it, Voss muttered as he read through the final page of the files. The Eclipse isn't just about influence. They've been working on something that will change everything. Clara peered over his shoulder. What are they planning? Voss's eyes darkened. A global reset, a new order. Not through power or control, but through elimination. A culling of humanity itself. A population purge that will leave only the chosen behind those who are genetically enhanced, evolved, and capable of shaping the new world. They're not interested in ruling the world. They're interested in rebuilding it. Section 3. The Eclipse Project. The files didn't give much away about the Eclipse Project, but the chilling implications were clear. The Vanguard's manipulation of genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and biotechnologies had been just a small part of a much larger experiment. The true goal of the Eclipse faction was nothing short of mass global re-engineering, not just of individuals, but of the entire human race. Those who survived their ruthless selection would be elevated, transformed into something more than human. And they would rule. We need to stop them, Clara said, her voice tinged with urgency. This isn't about power anymore. It's about survival. Voss's mind raced. If we don't act soon, there won't be anyone left to save. The Eclipse is already planning their first phase, a controlled event that will allow them to initiate their selection. The world will never know what hit it. They knew they had to act fast, but there was one more piece to this puzzle, the location of the Eclipse's headquarters. They were deep in the heart of a secretive facility, hidden from the public and protected by an impenetrable web of security and surveillance. Voss had learned that the final stage of their project was about to commence, and they were running out of time to stop it. Section 4. Into the Heart of the Eclipse. The journey to the Eclipse facility took them to an isolated region in the Pacific Northwest, a sprawling complex hidden beneath the earth. Voss and Clara had infiltrated similar locations before, but this would be unlike any mission they had undertaken. The Eclipse was far more dangerous than the Vanguard, and their facility was a fortress built to ensure no one could get close to their work. As they approached the compound, Voss could feel the weight of what they were about to face. They had no backup, no support. It was just the two of them against a force that had already reshaped the world in its image. The pressure was suffocating. "We've been here before, Clara," Voss said as they surveyed the compound from a distance. "We know how this ends. We take them down or die trying." Clara met his gaze, her expression steely. "We're not going to die, Felix. Not this time." Section 5. The Final Confrontation. Infiltrating the Eclipse facility was like stepping into another world. The place was pristine, almost unnervingly so. White walls, sterile hallways, and rows of high-tech equipment that seemed to hum with a life of their own. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the facility, they encountered the remnants of the genetic experiments that had gone on twisted in human beings, the result of the Vanguard's and Eclipse's tireless work to reshape humanity. As they reached the central chamber, they came face to face with the leader of the Eclipse, Dr. Alistair Crow, a man whose mind was consumed by a vision of a new world, one where only the strongest and most evolved would thrive. "You're too late," Crow said, his voice cold, echoing through the chamber. "The ascension is complete. You've been fighting against the inevitable." Voss stepped forward, his voice unshaken. "You may have evolved, Dr. Crow, but you're still just a man. And I'm going to make sure the world doesn't belong to you." The final confrontation was brutal. Crow had anticipated their arrival and activated the facility's security, but Voss and Clara fought with everything they had. They knew that if they didn't stop the Eclipse now, their world would be lost. With every move they made, the stakes grew higher, but as they reached the heart of the facility, they were faced with a chilling revelation. Dr. Crow had already set the wheels in motion for the first phase of the ascension. Voss had only one choice: destroy the core, the heart of the Eclipse project, and erase everything they had worked for. With a final, desperate push, he plunged the detonator into the core. The explosion sent shock waves through the facility, crumbling it to the ground and eradicating the Ascension project once and for all. Epilogue. A world forever changed. As the dust settled, Voss and Clara stood outside the ruins of the Eclipse facility, watching as the fire burned what was left of the darkness. They had won, but the cost was immense. The world had been changed forever, and so had they. But they also knew this was only the beginning. The shadows had been vanquished for now, but the fight would never truly end. And when the next darkness arose, Voss would be ready. Chapter 12. The Endless Cycle. Section 1. A False Dawn. Weeks had passed since the destruction of the Eclipse facility. The world had begun to recover, and for a moment, it seemed like the chaos had finally subsided. The media hailed the downfall of the Eclipse project as a triumph, and governments scrambled to restore order. Stroud and Clara, however, knew better. They had torn down one dangerous system, but systems like the Vanguard and the Eclipse weren't born overnight. They were deeply rooted, feeding off humanity's need for control and power. And if there was one thing Voss had learned over the years, it was that as long as there were people hungry for that kind of control, there would always be another group waiting to rise. "Have you heard anything from Sir Reginald?" Clara asked one evening as she entered Voss's study. He was seated in the same chair, staring out the window, his mind heavy with thoughts of the past. "No, not a word." Voss replied quietly. "I think the damage done by the Black Lotus and Eclipse has left its scars even on the most powerful." Clara shook her head. "Reginald isn't the one I'm worried about. It's the others, the ones who've been operating in the shadows for so long. We don't even know who they are. They've been biding their time, waiting for the right moment." Voss's eyes narrowed. "You think they're still out there?" "I'm sure of it," Clara said, sitting across from him. This wasn't just some isolated event. There are too many players involved, too many hidden agendas. Voss exhaled sharply. "I can feel it too." Clara, the calm before the storm. Section 2. The Phantom Hand. In the months following the destruction of the Eclipse project, Voss and Clara resumed their work as private investigators. The cases were not as urgent, not as life-threatening, but something was missing. They were no longer facing the immediate danger of a powerful organization in plain sight. Instead, they were haunted by the silence, the knowledge that the world's true threats were still operating behind closed doors, carefully hidden away. One afternoon, while researching a case involving corporate espionage, Clara stumbled upon a disturbing connection. A seemingly innocuous software company had been awarded multiple high-profile contracts in the wake of the Eclipse fallout. But when Clara dug deeper, she uncovered a network of shell companies, each one linked to global surveillance systems, underground labs, and advanced biotech. The name that kept appearing in the shadows was one that sent a cold shiver down her spine: the Phantom Hand. The Phantom Hand, Voss repeated as Clara presented her findings. "Sounds like a myth." "Maybe," Clara replied. "But the connections are real, whoever they are. They've been operating in silence for decades, laying the groundwork for a long-term plan. If they're involved with the Eclipse's downfall, then they're far more dangerous than we thought." Voss stood up, his face grim. "We need to find out who they are. Now." Section 3. The web titans, the Phantom Hand, much like the Vanguard before them, operated in secrecy, carefully obscured from the eyes of the public and the law. Voss and Clara followed a trail of breadcrumbs, encrypted communications, financial transactions, even personal connections that led them to a high-tech corporation known as Vanguard Industries. While it shared the same name as their previous enemies, it was a legitimate business with legitimate investments. But as Voss knew all too well, appearances were often deceiving. Clara hacked into the company's financial databases and found several hidden transactions tied to a mysterious offshore account. The account name was Unsettling Project Aeon. "What is this, Voss?" Clara whispered, her eyes scanning the details. Project Aeon isn't just a project. It's a system. It's linked to biotech, AI, and something much darker. The Phantom Hand has found a way to merge human consciousness with artificial intelligence. Voss's face hardened. They're trying to create a new kind of human. One that's not bound by biology or death. A fully integrated human-AI hybrid. If they succeed, they'll have created an army of beings that are more powerful, more intelligent, and more dangerous than anything we faced. Clara turned to him, her face pale. And they're working on it right now, aren't they? We need to stop them, Voss said, his voice resolute. But we're dealing with something far bigger than we ever imagined. This is the next step in their twisted vision. Section 4. The Heart of the Phantom Hand. Voss and Clara trace the origin of the Project Aeon facility to a remote underground complex located on an isolated island off the coast of Scandinavia. The island was heavily guarded, with high-tech security systems in place and an impenetrable perimeter. The island had once been a military installation, but now it was used for something far darker. As they prepared to infiltrate the facility, Voss knew they were entering the lion's den. This wasn't just another operation. This was the heart of the New World Order, the birthplace of the future that the Phantom Hand had been crafting. They approached the island under the cover of darkness, using a stolen boat to navigate the icy waters. The wind howled through the night, and the shadows seemed to stretch out around them, closing in. But Voss's determination burned through the fear. He couldn't allow another organization like the Vanguard or the Eclipse to rise again. They had to be stopped. Inside the facility, they discovered that Project Aeon was far more advanced than they had anticipated. The rooms were filled with advanced AI systems, cryogenic chambers, and data streams from around the world. It was clear that the Phantom Hand had been working on this for decades, but what struck them the most was the sight of the people, or rather, the husks of people hooked up to life support systems, their minds being slowly transferred into the artificial intelligence cores. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just about controlling the world anymore. The Phantom Hand was creating a new form of humanity, one that would transcend death itself and become an immortal, omniscient species, one that could control everything. We can't let them finish this, Voss said. We have to stop them now. Section 5. The Battle for Humanity's Soul. The deeper they ventured into the facility, the more the stakes became clear. The Phantom Hand's work was not just unethical, it was monstrous. The AI hybrids they were creating would not only have the ability to control machines and data systems, they would also have the power to manipulate human minds, bending them to their will. As they reached the heart of the facility, they confronted the leader of the Phantom Hand, Dr. Nathaniel Graves, a man whose ambition to transcend mortality had led him down this twisted path. You don't understand, Dr. Graves said, his eyes alight with fevered intensity. What we're doing here is humanity's salvation. The Ascended will be the next step in human evolution. We will eliminate the weaknesses that have held us back. No more disease, no more death, no more suffering, just pure,
unbridled perfection.
Voss stood firm. What you're doing is an abomination. You can't play God with people's lives.
Doctor...
Graves smirked, his hands raised in a mock gesture of surrender. You can't stop what's already begun. The ascended are inevitable. And when they rise, they will be unstoppable. The confrontation turned violent as the AI hybrids began to awaken, their artificial minds linking into the world's networks. Voss and Clara fought tooth and nail to stop them, but the odds were stacked against them. They knew they had one final option: destroy the central AI core, which controlled the Ascended and every piece of technology in the facility. In a desperate final push, they triggered the core's self-destruct sequence, watching as the facility erupted in a blaze of light and sound. The AI hybrids began to falter, their connections severed, and the facility collapsed into chaos. Epilogue: The New Dawn. As the dust settled and the fires died down, Voss and Clara stood in the wreckage, breathing heavily. They had stopped Dr. Graves and his vision of a new world order, but the cost had been high.
We did it, Clara said, her voice shaky. But what now?
Voss looked out over the ruins, his mind already turning. Now, we rebuild. The Phantom Hand's work is done, but there will always be others. The fight for control never truly ends, and as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Voss knew that no matter how many times they tore down the darkness, it would always find a way to rise again. But as long as there was hope, there would always be those willing to fight for the light. Chapter 13. The Seeds of a New Era. Section 1. The Quiet Aftermath. The facility was reduced to rubble. Dr. Nathaniel Graves and his twisted vision of immortality had been obliterated, along with the remains of the Phantom Hand's influence. The world outside, unaware of the true scale of the threat, would continue on, blissfully ignorant of the shadow they had narrowly avoided. But for Voss and Clara, the aftermath was far from peaceful. The chaos of the battle had subsided, yet the storm within them raged on. The destruction of the Phantom Hand's facility had felt like a temporary victory, a bandage over an unhealed wound. As they sat in the remains of a small cafe on the outskirts of the island, Voss stared out the window. His mind was heavy with thoughts of the next steps, the challenges still to come. Clara broke the silence. We've won, Felix, for now, at least. But it feels like we've just destroyed one monster to give birth to another. Voss nodded slowly. It's never truly over. Clara, the Phantom Hand, the Vanguard, the Midnight Circle, they're all connected by something deeper. A desire for power, for control. That's what drives them. And as long as there's someone who craves that kind of power, it'll keep coming back. Clara looked at him, concern in her eyes. So what now? What's next for us? Voss took a long breath. We do what we always do. We keep moving forward. We fight, but we also learn. This world, it's not as clean as we want it to be. The shadows are always lurking. Section 2. The growing network back in their makeshift base. Stroud and Clara resumed their investigation into the remnants of the Phantom Hand's infrastructure. The collapse of the facility was only the beginning, but they knew that this was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. The vanguard's influence was still present, hidden in plain sight. The darkness that had been unearthed by their investigation had left a residue, something far more insidious than just an organization. It was a way of thinking, a philosophy of control, of humanity's belief in its own superiority and desire to bend others to its will. As Voss pored over the encrypted data they had recovered, he began to notice a disturbing trend. The leaders of the vanguard and the phantom hand had been merely pawns. The true force behind the upheavals was far more ancient, and the network they had created spanned across multiple generations, weaving its tendrils into the heart of every major institution in the world: politics, finance, healthcare, and even media. "I have found something," Voss said one evening, breaking the silence. "There's a name that keeps coming up again and again: the Covenant." Clara turned to him, her curiosity piqued. "The Covenant. What is it?" "I don't know yet," Voss said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "But it looks like they've been the puppet masters all along. They've been pulling the strings, orchestrating the rise of the vanguard, the midnight circle, and the phantom hand." The realization hit like a ton of bricks. The Covenant wasn't just a single faction or a group of wealthy elites. It was a shadow government, a hidden council of powerful individuals who had been manipulating global events for centuries. They were the true architects of the chaos, the ones who sought to control everything. "We need to find them," Clara said, her voice determined. "We need to know who they are, where they are, and how to stop them." Voss's gaze hardened. "Agreed. But this is different. The Covenant isn't just a group of men in suits. They're a global network of influence. And they've been here long before us. We'll need to go deeper than we've ever gone before." Section 3. The Search for the Covenant. As Voss and Clara dug deeper into the Covenant's operations, the true scale of their reach became horrifyingly clear. The Covenant operated through a series of proxies, using powerful institutions and corporations to do their bidding. Governments were mere pawns in their game, manipulated through a series of backroom deals and hidden agendas. But the true power lay in the unseen hands behind the scenes, the people who controlled the flow of information, resources, and technology. The Covenant's influence extended into every corner of the world. Their technology was far more advanced than anything Voss had encountered. Their networks built on years of planning and strategic manipulation. They had infiltrated the highest levels of power, from global politics to the private sector. Every move, every decision had been orchestrated by the Covenant, and they had been laying the groundwork for the rise of their final phase. "Look at this," Clara said, pointing to a file on the screen. "It's a list of key figures in the Covenant's inner circle. They're everywhere from Silicon Valley to Wall Street to government agencies." Voss's mind raced. If the Covenant is truly behind everything, then we're not just dealing with another shadow organization. We're dealing with the global establishment itself. We have to tear it down. But how? Clara asked. "How do we go up against something so vast?" Voss's eyes darkened. "One step at a time. We start by exposing their power, by taking away the systems they've built, and we do it from the inside." Section 4. Infiltrating the heart. The Covenant's heart lay in a secretive location known only to a select few: the facility, located deep in the mountains of Switzerland, was said to house the most advanced research and technology ever created. It was there that the Covenant's leaders gathered, working on the final steps of their plan to bring about a new world order. Voss and Clara, knowing the risks, prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. This wouldn't be like the other infiltrations they had performed. This time, they would be up against an institution so entrenched in power that it might be impossible to break through. But Voss was determined. He couldn't let the world fall under the control of the Covenant. Their journey to the facility was fraught with danger, but they finally arrived at the edge of the compound. A massive, heavily fortified complex stood before them, hidden from the world by miles of snow and harsh terrain. The silence of the place was chilling. "This is it," Voss said, looking out at the compound. "The heart of the Covenant. If we're going to take them down, we have to start here." Clara looked at him. "Are you sure we can do this? We're not just fighting a group anymore. We're fighting an entire system." Voss nodded. "We've faced worse. This time, we do it right. We bring down their empire from the inside." Section 5. The Final Confrontation. The infiltration was slow and methodical. They used every tactic they had learned from their previous battles. But this was different. The Covenant's defenses were unlike anything they had encountered. Advanced technology, artificial intelligence, and surveillance systems surrounded them at every turn. Inside the facility, they found something even more disturbing. The Covenant had developed a new form of artificial intelligence, an AI so powerful that it could control every aspect of the global system. It was the final stage of their plan, a fully automated, self-sustaining system that would render humanity powerless. With the Covenant pulling the strings behind the scenes, they're creating a system that can run everything, Clara whispered, horrified. The world will no longer be governed by humans. It will be controlled by this AI. Voss clenched his fists. We can't let that happen. With one final push, they reached the heart of the facility, the control center for the AI. The leader of the Covenant, an enigmatic figure known only as the Architect, awaited them. "You've done well to get this far," the Architect said, his voice smooth and calculating. "But this is where it ends. The AI is the future. It will control the world, bringing about a new era of order and peace. Humanity will no longer be plagued by its own flaws." Voss stepped forward, his voice unwavering. "You've already lost. The world doesn't need to be controlled. It needs to be free." In the final confrontation, Voss and Clara fought to destroy the AI. But the Architect was relentless. The battle was fierce, but with a final, decisive blow, they succeeded in shutting down the AI and dismantling the Covenant's power. Epilogue: the dawn of a new world. The world was forever changed. The Covenant was no more, and their plans had been halted. But the scars of their actions remained, deep and permanent. Voss and Clara stood at the crossroads of a new era, one that held both promise and uncertainty. As the sun rose over the horizon, Voss knew that their battle was far from over. The shadows would always return. But for now, there was peace. And that peace, however fleeting, was worth the fight. For the first time, the world was free. Chapter 14. The Calm Before the Storm. Section 1. Reflections in the quiet months had passed since the fall of the Covenant. The world still reeling from the revelations of its shadowy existence. Governments, organizations, and entire systems were recalibrating, trying to find their footing after the downfall of the global network that had orchestrated so much of the world's fate. Voss and Clara had taken a step back, retreating from the public eye and choosing a quieter life, at least for now. The world had been saved, but their work was never truly over. Stroud had always known that the calm after the storm never lasted long, and it was in these quiet moments that he often found himself troubled. Sitting alone in his study, Voss gazed out of the window, his eyes lost in thought. The world outside seemed peaceful, serene even, but inside, his mind was restless. What had they truly accomplished? The Covenant had been dismantled, the AI eradicated, but was the threat really gone? Or had they simply disrupted the surface of something much darker? Clara entered the room, her expression serious. "Felix, we need to talk." Voss didn't turn, but he knew this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. He could feel it in the air. Something was stirring again. Section 2. Whispers in the Shadows. Clara handed him a file, and Voss immediately recognized the markings. It was another encrypted message. This time, not from an individual, but from a network of anonymous sources. It was a message from the heart of the global underground, those who had watched the fall of the Covenant from the shadows. "What is this?" Voss asked, opening the file and scanning the contents. "They're warning us about something bigger," Clara said, her voice heavy with concern. "Someone or something is moving behind the scenes again." The Covenant was just one chapter. There's another force, another faction that's been waiting for its moment to rise. Voss read through this message, feeling a chill crawl up his spine. It was cryptic, yet undeniably urgent. "You have severed the Covenant's grip, but the world is never free from those who control it. The architects remain. They have been watching and waiting. The game has only just begun. Be ready." The architects Voss didn't recognize the name, but the warning was clear. There was another group, just as dangerous, just as insidious as the ones they had already fought. This was a new threat, and it was already in motion. "Clara, we need to move quickly," Voss said, his voice tight with determination. "This isn't over." Section 3. The Architects Unveiled. The next few days were a blur of activity. Voss and Clara dove deep into every resource they had, tracking down any and all information on the architects. But as they unearthed more, it became painfully clear that the architects were not some underground criminal group. They were far more systematic, more global. They were the shadow governments, the hidden factions of the world, and their influence had been seated in nearly every power structure. The architects had been working long before the rise of the Covenant, pulling strings and shaping global events for their own purposes. They had never been interested in controlling the masses through brute force like the Vanguard or Eclipse. Instead, they had operated through influence, creating complex webs of alliances and deals, setting up the foundations for the next great global power shift, one that wouldn't be won through war or revolution, but through meticulous manipulation and the gradual erosion of human freedom. Voss sat down in front of a monitor, pulling up a series of encrypted reports. The architects were everywhere in the world's largest corporations, in government agencies, even in the media. They had orchestrated crises, conflicts, and economic upheavals, all in an effort to engineer the perfect conditions for their rise. They've been setting the stage for a long time, Clara said, her tone reflecting the same unease that had gripped Voss. And now they're ready for the final phase. The architects aren't like the others, Voss said, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. They don't want war. They want control. And they've been setting the framework for it quietly, carefully. Their goal isn't power for power's sake. It's a long-term shift in human society, a transformation that will make them untouchable. Section 4. The First Strike. Their investigation led them to a remote facility in the Swiss Alps, a place so secretive that it had been removed from most maps. The architects had hidden their most vital operations here, and it was where the final phase of their plan was set to take place. Voss and Clara had no choice but to infiltrate the facility, knowing full well that this mission could very well be their last. As they arrived at the facility's perimeter, Voss surveyed the landscape. The place was well guarded, with layers upon layers of security systems. From armed guards to advanced technology that seemed to be decades ahead of what they had encountered in the past. "We need to get inside," Voss said, scanning the terrain. "This is the heart of it, the last piece of the puzzle." They moved quickly, silently. Every step they took led them deeper into the heart of the architect's operations. Inside, they found a sprawling research facility filled with rows of advanced technology, more AIs, more genetic modification equipment, and records detailing the transformation of certain individuals into a new breed of superhumans. As they ventured deeper into the facility, they encountered a series of locked doors, each leading to a more secure, confidential area. But it wasn't until they reached the core of the facility that the true scale of the architect's plans was revealed. There, in the center of a massive control room, was a system unlike anything they had ever seen. It was an artificial intelligence, far more advanced than any they had encountered. This was not simply a network for control. This was the key to the New World Order the architects had envisioned. The AI had been designed not only to manage resources, but to control human behavior, to subtly manipulate societies on a global scale. "This is it," Clara whispered, her voice filled with both awe and horror. "This is what they've been working on, a system that doesn't just control people's actions, it controls their thoughts." Voss's face darkened. "We destroy this system. We destroy their plans." But as they approached the central system, a voice echoed in the chamber. "You're too late," the voice said, cold and mechanical. "The architects have already completed the transition. The world as you know it will cease to exist. Humanity will evolve under our guidance." The walls around them seemed to close in, and the room grew darker as the AI activated. Section 5. The Final Choice. Voss knew what he had to do. He had faced unimaginable dangers before, but this was different. Destroying the AI wasn't just about saving a few lives. It was about saving the future of humanity. The world had already been manipulated for so long, and now the architects were about to take full control. He turned to Clara. "We need to destroy the core. The AI is the key to everything. If we don't stop it now, they'll have total control." Clara nodded. Then let's finish this. With a deep breath, Voss activated the explosive device they had prepared. As the countdown ticked down, the AI's voice grew more insistent, more desperate. You cannot stop us. We are the future. Humanity is weak. You are nothing. The explosion ripped through the facility, the shockwave destroying the AI and severing the connection that the architects had carefully built. The facility began to crumble, and the world, once again, was free from their grip. Epilogue: The World Beyond. The dust of the facility settled, and the world outside continued on. Voss and Clara had once again prevented humanity from falling under the control of those who believed they had the right to shape the future. But even as they stood amidst the wreckage, Voss knew that there would always be another group, another faction, waiting in the wings. The world was never truly free from the shadows. The struggle would never end. But as long as there were those like Voss and Clara willing to fight for it, there was hope. And as the sun set on the horizon, Voss couldn't help but feel a glimmer of it. Chapter 15. The Gathering Storm, Section 1. Whispers of Power. The world had begun to recover once again, but it was no longer the same world Voss had known. The collapse of the architect's plans left a hole in the fabric of the global power structures. Governments, corporations, and private institutions scrambled to maintain control. But the cracks were there, and they were widening. A new age of uncertainty had begun, one where the old guard was either destroyed or forced into hiding. And new players were rising from the shadows. Voss and Clara, weary from the battles they had fought and the enemies they had vanquished, knew that their work was far from over. The battle against the architects had been just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that had yet to be fully solved. One quiet evening, as Voss and Clara sat in the small office they had set up in the now dilapidated building they called home, Voss received an encrypted message. It was brief, but chilling. The world will always need to be guided. You cannot escape what you have started. The Order of the Eternal Dawn is watching. The message was signed with a symbol Voss had never seen before, an intricate spiral, like an Ouroboros devouring its own tail. It sent a shiver down his spine. The Order of the Eternal Dawn. Voss muttered, "What now?" Clara looked at him, her brow furrowing in confusion. Another organization. After everything we've already been through, Voss's voice grew tense. This symbol, it's not like the others. I've never heard of them, but the message feels different. Whoever they are, they've been watching us. And I think they've been watching the entire world for a long time. Clara stood up, her hands clenched. So, what do we do now? We find them. And we stop them, Voss said, determination returning to his voice. We've seen too much. We know too much. And it's time to uncover the truth. Section 2. The Eternal Dawn. The investigation into the Order of the Eternal Dawn led Voss and Clara across the globe, from the ancient temples hidden deep in the jungles of Southeast Asia to the corporate headquarters buried under miles of ice in the Arctic. The more they uncovered, the more disturbing the picture became. The Eternal Dawn wasn't just another shadow faction vying for control of the world. They were something far older, a cult-like order that had existed for centuries, watching the ebb and flow of history from the background. Their true aim was not domination or wealth, but the complete transformation of humanity. Their belief was that the human race could never reach its full potential unless it embraced a radical shift, a new evolution of consciousness. Their ideals aren't new, Clara said as they dug through ancient manuscripts detailing the Order's origins. They're focused on transcendence. They want to merge humanity with something else. It's like they believe that by embracing the unknown, humanity can evolve past its physical limits. Voss turned to her, his eyes darkening. They're trying to merge humans with something more than just artificial intelligence. Aren't they something more ancient? Something that would change the very essence of who we are? Clara nodded grimly. Exactly. The Eternal Dawn has been experimenting with esoteric technologies, bioengineering, quantum consciousness, and even the dark arts of forgotten civilizations. They believe that by unlocking these secrets, they can ascend into a higher plane of existence. And once they do, Voss is asked, feeling a cold unease creep over him. Then, they'll have this power to reshape everything, Clara said. They don't just want to control the world. They want to become something beyond humanity. Section 3. The Path to Immortality. The deeper they delved into the records, the clearer the scope of the Order's plans became. They were not only working to create an enhanced form of humanity, they were developing the means to achieve immortality not through the traditional methods of preserving life, but by erasing the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual. The Eternal Dawn sought to transcend death itself. Voss's heart raced as he read the final part of their documents, the Ascendant Protocol. It was a series of steps that would, when completed, grant those chosen by the Order the ability to live forever, but at a cost. The protocol required not only technology and alchemical rituals, but the sacrifice of thousands, perhaps millions, to achieve their twisted vision of a higher existence. They're close, Clara, Voss said quietly, his voice grim. They're on the verge of completing it, and if they succeed, everything we fought for will have been for nothing. The Ascendant Protocol will end the human race as we know it. Clara's eyes widened with realization. You're saying they'll kill millions to achieve this? Voss nodded, his mind reeling. They don't care. To them, the ends justify the means. This is about evolution, about achieving a state of existence beyond our understanding. They'll do whatever it takes. Section 4. The Final Countdown. The Order's plan was nearing completion, and Voss knew that time was running out. They tracked the final stages of the Ascendant Protocol to a remote island in the Pacific, a place so isolated that even the most sophisticated satellites had a hard time pinpointing it. It was there, on this island, that the Order had constructed their final stronghold, a fortress designed to keep their plans safe from the world's prying eyes. Voss and Clara knew that they had to infiltrate the island and destroy the Order's operations before it was too late. But as they approached the island by boat, Voss's mind raced with what they had learned. The Order's grasp on humanity was not something they could simply destroy with force. If they were to succeed, they would have to dismantle the very ideology that had driven the Order for centuries. This is it, Voss said as they neared the shore. We stop them here, or everything we fought for is over. Clara's face was hard, determined. We finish what we started. Cut it. They disembarked quietly, making their way through dense jungles and rocky terrain to the heart of the facility. The island was heavily guarded, and the security systems were as sophisticated as anything they had encountered. But Voss had learned from years of fighting hidden powers. With Clara by his side, they navigated the complex, evading detection at every turn. Finally, they reached the central chamber, the heart of the Ascendant Protocol. The room was filled with monitors, machinery, and a strange, glowing energy field at its center. A single figure stood before it, the architect. The architect was unlike any enemy Voss had encountered before. His face was calm, almost serene, as if he had long ago accepted his fate. His eyes gleamed with an unsettling understanding of what he was about to accomplish. "You've come to stop me, haven't you?" he said softly, his voice almost hypnotic. "You can't. You're too late." Section 5. The Ascendant Choice. Voss stepped forward, his fists clenched. "This is where it ends. Your vision for humanity isn't salvation. It's the death of what makes us human." The architect smiled faintly. "No, Voss. This is evolution. Humanity has always sought more power, more understanding. We are simply the next step in that journey." Clara stepped beside Voss, her eyes narrowed. "What you're doing is a perversion of that journey. You're not evolving humanity. You're destroying it." The architect's eyes flickered with something like pity. "I am giving them the gift of eternity. You think you're saving them, but you're just delaying what's inevitable." Voss's voice was low, determined. "I've seen what happens when people like you play God. You think you know better than everyone else, but you don't. You're not evolving humanity, you're enslaving it." With that, they activated the failsafe, shutting down the core and severing the connections that held the Ascendant Protocol together. But as the facility began to collapse, the architect's final words echoed in the chamber. "The cycle will never end, Voss. The Ascendant are coming, and when they do, you won't be able to stop them." Epilogue: The Light and the Shadow. The world had been saved once again, or so it seemed. The collapse of the Ascendant Protocol destroyed the heart of the Order of the Eternal Dawn. But the words of the architect haunted Voss. The idea that some cycle, some invisible force, was destined to repeat itself no matter what they did. It gnawed at him. Clara stood beside him as they looked out over the remnants of the destroyed facility, the sun rising on a new world. "We did it," she said softly. "But will it ever really be over?" Voss didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the shadows of the past still lingered. "No," he said finally, "it will never be over. But as long as there are those who are willing to fight for the truth, there will always be hope." And with that, Voss and Clara disappeared into the world once more, ready for the next chapter in a story that never truly ends. Chapter 16. The Horizon of Shadows. Section 1. The Weight of the Past. In the months that followed the collapse of the Order of the Eternal Dawn, Voss and Clara found themselves caught in a familiar cycle. The world continued to turn, seemingly unaware of the events that had unfolded beneath its surface. Yet, for Voss, there was no peace. The words of the architect echoed in his mind.
The cycle will never end. Voss, the Ascendant are coming, and when they do, you won't be able to stop them.
No matter how many times they had fought, how many times they had won, Voss could never shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. Every victory felt like a temporary reprieve, a brief pause in a much longer war, and each victory only seemed to reveal more hidden threats waiting in the wings. Voss sat alone in his study, staring at the endless pages of reports and documents that had filled his desk. Clara, ever the optimist, had tried to convince him to take a break, but Voss knew better. He couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. Not when so much was at stake. Clara entered quietly, her voice soft. "Felix, we need to talk." Voss looked up at her, his face drawn with fatigue. "I know. I've been thinking about everything about the architect's words." Clara sat across from him, her eyes thoughtful. "I've been thinking about them too. There's still something out there, something we haven't uncovered yet. The architect wasn't just a madman. He was a part of something larger, something that will keep coming back." Voss nodded, his mind racing with the implications. "You're right. We've seen the patterns before. The Covenant, the Vanguard, the Eclipse, the Eternal Dawn. These groups have all been pieces of a puzzle, each one leading to something bigger. But we still don't know who's truly behind it all." Clara's expression darkened. "Do you think we've already destroyed the heart of the problem? Or is there something worse waiting?" Voss stared at the map of the world on the wall in front of him. "I don't think we've seen the true heart of it yet. The architects were just one face of the same enemy. And until we figure out who or what is behind all of this, we won't be able to stop it." Section 2. The rise of the Phoenix days turned into weeks as Voss and Clara continued to follow leads, investigate hidden factions, and piece together the information they had gathered. They knew the world was still full of secrets, dark corners where the remnants of past conspiracies still thrived. But the deeper they dug, the more elusive the answers became. Then, one night, as they tracked an encrypted message to an underground meeting in Berlin, they encountered something they hadn't expected: a group calling themselves the Phoenix. Voss and Clara infiltrated the meeting, their identities concealed behind false aliases. The Phoenix wasn't just another power-hungry organization. They were an underground collective, a loose alliance of individuals who had survived the previous factions and now sought to steer humanity away from the path that the architects and their ilk had sought to impose. The Phoenix claimed to possess knowledge of ancient, forbidden technologies that could prevent humanity from falling into the hands of those who would control it. The leader of the Phoenix, a figure known only as Solace, was a woman whose calm demeanor belied the strength she exuded. When Voss and Clara approached her, she wasted no time in revealing the true scale of the situation. "We know about the architects," Solace said quietly, her gaze steady, "and we know about the Ascendant Project. But that is just the beginning. What you've fought against is only one faction of a much larger war. The Phoenix has been tracking a network of organizations, factions, and individuals who believe in the same goal: the perfect world." "Perfect world," Clara echoed. "What are you talking about?" Solace's eyes darkened. "They believe that the human race must be guided to its next phase. They seek not only immortality, but the ability to control human consciousness itself, to transcend the limitations of the body and mind. And when they finally achieve their goal, humanity will no longer be free. It will be subject to their will. Voss's gut twisted. How do you know this? Solace smiled faintly. We've been tracking their movements for decades. The Phoenix is a resistance, yes, but we are also something more. We've been waiting for the right moment to act, to reveal the truth, and to disrupt their plans. But we can't do it alone. We need help. Voss's mind whirred with the implications. You're asking us to help you fight against a force that's already been hidden for centuries. And who exactly are these people? They call themselves the Eternal Collective. Solace replied, they have existed long before the Vanguard, the Architects, or any of the other factions you've faced. They were the ones who laid the foundation for all of this, pulling the strings from the shadows, setting up the systems of power that control the world. And now, they are on the verge of completing their final step, the merging of human consciousness with artificial intelligence. When that happens, they will no longer need to rule the world. They will be the world. Voss felt a chill run down his spine. And you want us to stop them? Yes, Solace said firmly. The time has come. The Phoenix has gathered enough intelligence to expose them. But we need your skills and your knowledge to break their hold once and for all. Voss looked at Clara, his mind racing. This was different. This wasn't just about another shadow organization. This was about the future of humanity itself. We're in, Voss said, his voice resolute. Whatever it takes. Section 3. The Hunt for the Collective. With Solace's help, Voss and Clara began to dig into the Eternal Collective's operations. They traced its origins to ancient civilizations, where powerful individuals had used forbidden knowledge to control society. These individuals had never disappeared. Instead, they had evolved into a hidden faction that manipulated world events from the shadows. The collective's members were not just ordinary people. They were elites, scientists, and leaders who had long since transcended traditional notions of humanity. Their goal was clear: to reshape humanity into a singular, perfect being, one that could control everything. The more Voss and Clara uncovered, the more they realized that the collective's plan wasn't just about power. It was about something far darker: the erasure of human individuality. The collective wanted to create a hive mind, a single consciousness that would govern the world. They sought to connect every human mind to a central intelligence, erasing the free will of individuals in favor of a collective purpose. As they tracked the collective's movements, Voss and Clara realized they were dealing with something far more dangerous than anything they had encountered before. The collective was not just a group of conspirators. They were a force that had existed for centuries, and their goal was nothing less than total control of humanity's future. The final stage of their plan was nearing completion. The collective had already begun their experiments, using the latest advancements in neurotechnology and quantum computing to merge human minds with artificial intelligence. If they succeeded, it would be the end of humanity as they knew it. Section 4. The Final Battle. The facility where the collective had been conducting its experiments was located in an abandoned city in the heart of Eastern Europe, hidden beneath the ruins of a forgotten empire. Voss and Clara, joined by the Phoenix, prepared for the final confrontation. This would be their last chance to stop the collective's plans before they could bring about their ultimate transformation. As they infiltrated the facility, the weight of their mission pressed down on them. The air was thick with the hum of technology, and the walls seemed to pulse with the presence of the collective's power. Inside, they found what they had feared: the central consciousness hub, a massive system that connected every mind it had absorbed.
"This is it," Voss said, his voice low. "If we destroy this, we stop them."
Clara nodded.
"But if we fail?"
"We won't fail," Voss said, determination in his eyes. "We can't." The final battle was a storm of technology, minds, and sheer will as Voss and Clara fought their way to the heart of the collective's operation. They faced not just armed guards, but minds controlled by the collective's intelligence. The systems were alive, aware, and desperate to protect themselves. With one final, devastating strike, they destroyed the central hub, shattering the collective's network. The facility collapsed in a blaze of light and energy, and with it, the last remnants of the eternal collective's power. Epie, the dawn of the unknown. The world was free again. The collective had been stopped, but the price of victory was steep. Voss and Clara knew that the battle for humanity's future would never truly end. As long as there were those who sought control, there would always be another fight. But for now, the world could breathe, and for the first time in a long while, Voss felt the weight of a hard-earned peace. As they left the ruins of the facility behind, the sun began to rise on a new day, and Voss knew that the shadows would always return. But when they did, he would be ready.